Let's talk some NBA draft, and really not anybody better to talk about it than this man, Fran Fraschilla from ESPN, college basketball analyst on the Nick Cattle Show, Sports 1140 KHTK. Fran, thank you for the time. It's much appreciated. Let's start with this. If the draft was today, who do you think Orlando should take at number one?
Yeah, you got me on the spot only because there's so much time to evaluate these guys in the next month, but if you made me pick one guy today, I would say Jabari Smith, young man out of Auburn who is just a baby, 19 years old, just turned 19. And there's definitely an argument for the top three, Holmgren, Smith, Banchero. But I would also throw Jaden Ivey in there as well as a guy that could end up being the best player in this draft. If you made me decide, as of today, I would probably take Jabari Smith, 6'10", 215, outstanding shooter, excellent athlete, and just a baby, just turning 19.
Fran, I want to ask you about Chet Holmgren. Obviously, he's been listed, like you just listed him in the top three. I spoke with two draft analysts last week, and both had the same concern about Chet. It wasn't his frame, which we've heard a lot about, but the fact that he tended to not impact games as often as you might expect. Would you have that same concern? Did you see that same thing happen with Chet?
I saw him a lot this year. I got a chance to spend a week with Gonzaga in October and just studied him, and then we did a couple of games during the season. No, actually, I don't worry about his impact on a game. I do worry about his frame. If you go back and watch the Alabama game, a game they lost in Seattle early in the year, he must have fell down about 8 times in the game. And there's no questioning his talent. There's no questioning his drive. The kid plays with a chip on his shoulder. He might be 195, 200 pounds, but he's a very competitive guy. His skill level is high. My concern would be just his body type for the league and the fact that he is going to be pushed around quite a bit, especially early in his career, and it would be a concern of mine.
Fran Fraschilla with us here on the Nick Cattle Show, Sports 1140 KHTK. Fran, if you had a concern about Paolo Banchero, what would it be?
Well, I would say he's a good athlete, not a great athlete. The guy I compare him to, if you go back to his younger days, 1 year at Syracuse, and then, obviously, first 12, 13 years of his career, he reminds me of Carmelo Anthony. He's a big, thick kid. He's more of he obviously can shoot the ball from deep, but he's more of a mid-range killer.
Yep.
Can get to the basket. To me, if there's a comp for him, and I'm a comp guy, I like comps. I like to be able to tell somebody that somebody plays like somebody else that they already know. I would say Paolo is probably in that Carmelo range, who, again, Nick, wasn't a great athlete when you talk about by the standards, say, of a LeBron, a Clyde Drexler, or Michael Jordan, a jump out of the gym guy. But the skill level is comparable, and anybody who drafts a guy that is compared to Carmelo Anthony, and if you can get 70% of that, you take him right now.
Yeah, that's not a bad deal at all. Let me ask you about the other guy, the guy you said if you had to choose today, you would go number one, Jabari Smith. Any weaknesses, any questions about his game, Fran?
Physical development. He's not a creative player just yet, but I've seen him take off from the three-point line, get to the basket in one dribble, but he definitely has to physically mature at 19. I mean, think about it. He played his whole freshman year at Auburn as an 18-year-old, so he's going to spend his whole rookie year in the NBA at 19. And the one concern I have right now is, and I would probably say this, Nick, about all three of those guys, none of those guys are going to impact winning early in their careers. If you really look at players in the NBA that come in as lottery picks, and Evan Mobley might be an exception this year, although Cleveland has some pretty good players around him when you look at Jared Allen and Kevin Love, Darius Garland, but very few guys who go to bad teams, which these three guys are going to do, are going to impact winning. So when you take a Jabari Smith or a Holmgren or Banchero, you're hoping that as your team gets better, it's the same rate that my draft pick gets better. And so when Jabari is, let's say, 22 years old and he's with the Oklahoma City Thunder, you're hoping he's rounding into what could be an NBA all-star type talent.
Fran Fraschilla from ESPN is with us here on the Nick Cattle Show. Fran, we talked about the top three guys. Obviously, the local talk here is that the Kings jumped up from 7 to 4. They're sitting at 4. Lots of intrigue about what this team is going to do. To you, if you were drafting best player available and you got past those first three guys, is Jaden Ivey your fourth guy?
He is. I saw him a lot this year. Practices, games, blown away by him in November. I probably started the hype train in November at Mohegan Sun when I thought he could actually be the number one pick. And by the way, Nick, he could end up being the best player in this draft. We know it's likely not to happen. Obviously the Magic don't need another guard. They're loaded in the backcourt.
Right.
But Jaden Ivey, to me, the tempting thing for the Kings is they've just traded a really good guard. They've got two excellent young guards in Fox and Mitchell. And now the question is, do you take another guard when they obviously need shooting and they need some size up front? So that's the dilemma. But as I look at 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, honestly don't think anybody's close to Jaden Ivey. So now your choice is a couple things that are going to go on here. Do not be surprised if Sam Presti, who's done this before, passes on one of the bigs to take Ivey. People were shocked about a decade and plus ago when he took a kid out of UCLA who was barely, I don't want to say barely a contributor, but nobody knew how good Westbrook would be. And so Sam Presti's done this before. And the other thing, and that would leave a big guy for the Kings, somebody that they could probably use, of Holmgren, Smith, and Banchero. And I also think what you've read and what you've probably talked about on your show is in play, and that is I wouldn't be surprised if they don't feel they can take Ivey because of their backcourt and they can make a trade for a veteran or a lot of assets, that they may do that as well.
Fran, in your eyes, is Jaden, can he be a lead guard on an NBA team?
The same way Westbrook has been, and not the guy that we've watched the last couple of years.
Right.
In the league, and De'Aaron is a little bit like this. Donovan Mitchell's like this. I wouldn't call those pure point guards the way we might describe CP3 that way, or the way we describe Nash. These guys today that play quote-unquote point guard, Damian Lillard, Steph Curry, De'Aaron, and the guys I mentioned, these guys are scoring guards. And so he can be a guy that can be a ball-handling scoring guard. But the question is, Monty McNair and the coaching staff, how will the chemistry be? How will De'Aaron feel about being off the ball? Davion Mitchell, as he came into his own at the end of the Kings season. So that's going to be the question mark. If they don't feel that the chemistry will be right, it's not going to shock me if they make a trade for a veteran, a young veteran, or trade down, get a young veteran, and still get a pick that an 11 range, where they can still get a guy that could help them.
Fran Fraschilla is with us here from ESPN college basketball analyst. Just two more for you, Fran. And again, thank you for your time. Your basketball evaluation of Jaden Ivey. Do you think he could work with Fox in the backcourt?
That's tough for me to answer, Nick, because I'm not around. I'm not in Sacramento. You know what I mean? I think I get to go to practices and watch guys, watch their body language, watch their attitude. I mean, I could have told you, about Buddy Hield coming out of Oklahoma, somebody you know well, Javon Carter, Monte Morris, these guys that I pretty much lived with for 4 years in the Big 12. Davion Mitchell, another guy I watched 100 times. I don't know how the chemistry would be because I'm not there on a daily basis. That is the $64,000 question for any front office, is the background info, the work ethic, how he'll fit with other guys, how he'd be accepted by a De'Aaron Fox and a Davion Mitchell. So it's not a question I could really give you an honest answer to without being there every day.
Last one for you. We're running out of time, and I didn't get to ask you about Keegan Murray, but I want to ask you about somebody else. Another name that's been brought up is Shaedon Sharpe. Now, obviously, his story is a very interesting one. Did not play for Kentucky this year. Just from your own personal opinion, Fran, if you were running a front office, you're a head coach, guy didn't play in college, he didn't really play at the combine, been some questions about him. Is he too risky for you to take in the top 5?
Yes and no, Nick. On the surface, yes. There's very little intel. There's very little, there's no tape. There's obviously, unless you got to a Kentucky practice this year or watched them, growing up in Canada, coming down to the States, you might have done your due diligence then. Probably not at high of large sample size, but on occasion, there's a kid that comes out of nowhere. And I hate to use this example because it's unfair, but not a lot of people really felt good about. You think about Kobe Bryant.
Right.
I can remember back when Charlotte took him. Jerry West had his eyes on him. Traded Vlade to Charlotte, and Kobe turned out to be Kobe. And not what I'm saying is there are occasions where you just roll the dice on a kid with limited experience. And he turns out to be either a good player, a great player, and then once every 25 years, a Kobe Bryant. I don't know that about Shaedon right now, but I guarantee you that Monty McNair and the Kings are going to do everything they can to figure out whether this kid is worth taking at 4, because the one thing I hear about him is that he can really score as a wing, and in that regard, he would fit in with Mitchell and De'Aaron Fox as a 6'5" plus, wing player. So rolling the dice, but on occasion, good intel, good background info, you roll the dice and you get a superstar.
You know who he is. His name is Fran Fraschilla, ESPN college basketball analyst, former head coach, as we all know it. Fran, again, thank you for your time. Let's do this again soon. You were great.